Bonjour, c'est Claire à French in the Midlands. This is a massively important video which I made because I've had a lot of students say to me, I don't understand why when I speak to the French they look at me with a blank expression. And it's not that your accent in itself is wrong, it's that you probably mispronounce things slightly. You don't have to go far off for people to not understand you. Let me show you why. So one of the reasons you may not be understood when you speak French is you pronounce silent letters. As I keep saying to people, you should not say your final S's, D's, X's or T's. There are exceptions obviously, but very few. In that, just leave them out, unless obviously they're followed by an E, and then the E is silent. If there's no accents on it, ignore. Let me show you a few examples. One of the commonly mispronounced words is petit versus petite. You see, if you say your T, I'm hearing the feminine version of petit. So that in itself is no big deal. I would understand what you say, but it's a bit weird when you're a man and you use the feminine when you shouldn't. If you describe yourself and say je suis petite, I'm hearing I'm a woman and I'm small. Same for anglais versus anglaise. Un anglais is an Englishman, une anglaise an English woman. So please say anglais, don't say your S when you're a man. Anglaise, it's like a Z sound when you're a woman, is fine. It gets a bit more problematic for words like gâteau. If say your O is not perfect, plus you say the X, people might miss what you're saying altogether. If you say gâteaux, it doesn't really... We'll be thinking, what do you mean? Is it gâteau? Is it something else? There's going to be some doubt here. So just say gâteau. Un gâteau, des gâteaux. The worst of all, I think all the words in French, the worst ones you could confuse, is cours versus course. So many times people say to me, oh, j'ai fait une course. And I'm thinking, okay, you ran an errand or you ran a race. And they said, oh, no, I had a lesson. And they meant un cours. Okay, un cours versus une course. Un cours is a lesson, un cours de français, a French lesson, or une course could be either an errand or a race. So be really careful with that because that could throw out the whole meaning of your sentence. It's the same goes for the next two, un cas and une casse. At the moment on the news we hear a lot about un cas de COVID. So, a COVID case. Un cas is a case. Une casse is a scrapyard. So, please do not mix them up. Cas versus casse. The next reason is you say your final ENT when it's a verb in the they form. Let me give you an example. If I say to you, il parle, IL, it's he talks. ILS plus ENT is still il parle, but it means they talk, or they're talking. You see how it sounds exactly the same. Il parle, il parle. You don't say the S at the end of il, you don't say the ENT at the end of parle. And that's the key. If you say to me parlant, I'm hearing while talking, and then I'm waiting for the rest of the sentence. And I will completely miss what you're saying. Something that simple can really throw people. Same for the next one. Elle téléphone, she telephones. Elle téléphone, they telephone. You see how it sounds exactly the same. The next one's a bit different because it starts with a vowel. Il arrive become ils arrivent because you link the S of il with the first vowel. We do that a lot in French, and that's one reason why the British people kind of miss the meaning of a simple sentence, because then they don't expect the linking. They expect il arrive, and it's ils arrivent, and they think it's a different word, but it's not. We do that linking a lot in French. Il vend, he sells, becomes ils vendent. The only difference between the two is the D that is pronounced. Because there's ENT after it, you have to say everything up to the ENT, but ignore the ENT itself. So, il vend, ils vendent. The other thing I've noticed is people ignore accents on the E. Actually, e, and e are completely different sounds to the French ear. If you swap them around, I will not know what you're saying, even though it sounds really obvious to you. To a French person, it isn't. Let me give you some example. Achète, which is buys, as in he buys, or I buy. When you want to say bought, becomes acheter. And the only difference is where the accent goes. The accent in bought go to the final e of acheter, because the e is your ending, the ed ending of the past for er verbs. So achète, acheter. J'achète, I buy. J'ai acheté, I've bought, or I bought. The same goes for élève, which is a pupil, versus élevé, which means high or brought up. It depends on the context. Ici, élève versus élevé. Get that wrong and I have no idea what you're talking about. Côté versus côte is another one that I hear pronounced wrongly. Côté means the side, so à côté de means next to or by the side of, and la côte is the coast. And I hear some people say à côte to mean à côté, and I'm hearing what is it about the coast they're trying to tell me, and then I realize they mean à côté, next door, if you like. Be very careful with that one. Same for forêt versus forêt. Une forêt is a forest. Forêt is a hole that's been bored, is the word forêt. So you see how close that one is. E versus e. The e of forêt, the e of café. Forêt, forêt. The next reason you may not be understood is you don't emphasize vowels how or when you should. I keep saying that vowels are the holy grail of French. If you get them right, you're almost there. A good example of that is arriver, and it goes for every word that's very similar to English or exactly the same. It never sounds the same. To arrive versus arriver. So you see the difference. In English you say arrive. You could totally ignore the first a. In French you can't. You can never ignore a. It's a strong a. You can't ignore the I. It's never I in French. So you'd say arriver and then E because you got ER. If you didn't have the R, it would be arrive. But you've got that AI in there. The AI being of equal weight, if you like. So arriver. AIE is what you hear. Inviter, very similar to invite. Inviter. So IN always makes the sound un. So remember that, because sometimes when you see a word that's very similar to English, you kind of revert back to English in your head and you forget that IN makes the sound un. There's no inviter like I hear. It's inviter. Voyager. Interestingly enough, you've got two difficulties here. Because in English you say voyage or travel. So when you say voyage, the O is kind of glossed over. Well, in French it becomes wa, and the reason for that is because the Y there acts like an I and a Y. So voyager, it kind of doubles up in there. The next one's very, very good for practice. Impossible. You notice two things in there. The un, like I said before, I am, IN, it's all the same. It's un. Impossible. All the syllables are on the same height, the same weight, if you like. Impossible. There's no impossible like in English. Impossible. It's very light L on the end. The next one I really like because it's long. and it illustrates that point perfectly. Communication is actually communication. And again, you see there's no stress on any part of the word. Communication. And you really have to form your vowels really well. So what you hear really, when you're French and you listen to the word communication, you hear O-U-I-A-on. And that's what will carry the meaning of the word, if you like. So if you miss that, if you mispronounce that, I'm not sure what you're saying to me. The next difficulty is when you don't conjugate your verbs. Now remember, conjugate means to change the ending of the verb with the person who's speaking. And that's a very lazy thing to do. In French, you need to change the ending of the verb with the person. Let me give you an example. If you want to say to me, he's talking, a lot of people will say, a lot of English speakers will say, il parlait. So I'm hearing he to talk. So I'm here wondering why. Is he saying he talks? He will talk? He has talked? He might talk? I have no idea. It doesn't tell me anything. Just that ending, getting that ending wrong. What you should say is il parle. And that means he talks or he's talking. And then it's clear. The next explanation could be that your tenses are wrong, and that's easily done in French. You need to really think about what you want to say in English, then use the right tense throughout. I hear a lot of people who start speaking in the past tense and then revert to the present or switch to the future. I'm thinking, wait, did you do this, or are you going to do this? Or suddenly I get lost and I don't know what you're saying. For instance, if what you mean to say is I'm going to work late, so that's kind of the immediate future. You intend to work late. But if what you say to me is je travaille tard, that's the present tense, and I'm hearing I'm working late, as in right now. Or it could mean I work late as a general statement. I'm thinking, okay. You see, it's only present what I hear. But what you should say, if you want to state that it's immediate future, je vais travailler tard. I'm going to work late. Je vais is your I'm going. Je vais travailler tard. And then there's no ambiguity. Sometimes it's the present versus the past that is specifically the problem. For instance, if what you mean is I worked until 7 p.m., but what you say is j'ai travaillé jusqu'à 7 heures, you've only made one tiny mistake that has massive consequences because you forgot the accent at the end of travail, which would have made it travailler. I have worked. So what you say to me here is I have work until 7. I'm thinking, oh, okay, you have to work today till 7. It's not really correct, but that's what I'm interpreting. So something about working till 7 and it's not clear. What you should say is j'ai travaillé jusqu'à 7 heures. And the E of travailler is on the same level as all the other vowel sounds. Travailler. If it's just an E without an accent, yes, by all means ignore it. Suddenly if there's an accent on it, it means something else. Pronounce it. This is really big. This next reason is when all your words are right, you're just not using the correct French structure. Structure really defines the meaning of a sentence, and if you get that wrong, you can mean the complete opposite or something totally different, sometimes something rude, sometimes it's funny. Let me show you. For instance, when you want to say I arrived 2 days ago, most people start by translating I arrived 2 days and then they're stuck because they don't know how to say ago. Actually, you have to completely change that sentence to je suis arrivé il y a 2 jours. So your ago actually is the il y a, but it goes before the time clause. Il y a 2 jours. The next one's very commonly mispronounced or misconstructed. I have lived here for 10 years. When you say I have lived here for 10 years, in English, what you mean is you still live here and you've been here 10 years. So in French, you have to leave it in the present tense. You wouldn't say I have lived here. You would say I live here since 10 years. J'habite ici depuis 10 ans. Your depuis goes for or since, which is really handy for once. You know, for once French is simpler than English. It doesn't happen very often, so please take full advantage. You could very well have said j'habite ici depuis 1980. I've lived here since 1980s. That's fine. One big one, and I keep correcting everybody on that one. When you want to say we drove to France last week, you need to say in French, you need to deconstruct the whole thing into what you're doing and how. So if you translate literally, we drove to France last week, I'm hearing we drove around France all last week. And that doesn't really tell me where you've been. And it's not actually what you mean here. So you need to say, we went to France in the car last week. Then it's clear. And it is, on est allé en France en voiture la semaine dernière. That's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this. Please like it if you did. Subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll see you in the next one. À bientôt.